You have sweet, sweet tattoos, but you haven't felt the same since getting them. Dr. V and I had a great discussion this last weekend. We were actually teaching for Herbal Summer School, and believe it or not, my topic was Gotu Kola, Dr. V. So,
Okay.
something that will help people with scars. People don't realize that scars are like a hole in your armor. At least that's what Chinese medicine will say about it. And when he mentioned we need to talk about tattoos, I immediately started thinking about scars. So I want to talk about scars today, but also we have a very special guest, David. And David has a story that he wants to share with us to help us understand whether there's truth to there being a potential hazard with these tattoos, or is this just some silly story that somebody made up at some point? And we're going to talk about heavy metals with that. So, without further ado, please tell us your story, guys. Tell us why this is really important for anybody out there with tattoos to hear what we're about to say.
I can start with a quick. I mean, part of what we're going to talk about is mercury, unfortunately, with tats and with ink. Years ago, I actually had went on kind of a high fish diet, and so a lot of the fish I was eating was high in mercury, and so I was eating mahi, typically two big old pieces for lunch every day, and then just started realizing I couldn't get up the hills so fast on my bike, and my I mean, for me, that's my gauge is my performance. My performance started to really stink, and my hair loss was mercury and fluoride that I used. I had fillings as a kid, and then my mom it was the most diligent thing I remember as a kid was the fluoride tablets that my mom gave me, little blue tablets every day. So those were my hair loss triggers. But then when I realized that I was having this mercury toxicity from the fish, then I got after clearing it up. We'll talk about some of what I did and what we did with David as well. But it dramatically affected my performance. And ultimately, when we're talking about mercury, it causes low serotonin. And low serotonin people understand because that is the blues. That's like, what's the point? I don't want to get out of bed. Why leave the house? That's a low serotonin scenario that a lot of the different toxic metals, but especially mercury, triggers. So David came to me with a great story. I mean, he'd been chasing it around for 10 years by the time I met him. So you want to share a little bit about what you went through, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can kind of see here, I definitely have, a few tattoos. I was definitely an athlete growing up. Grew up in like Laguna Niguel, lived on mountain bikes, super active, what I felt was super healthy. Always dealt with anxiety growing up as a kid and led that into my early 20s, moved out, started getting tattooed rather quickly. I think that was very taxing on the body as well. That's a whole nother aspect of like taxing your immune system and kind of stressing your body out, just being blasted with my entire side and sitting there for 4, 6, 8 hours, probably isn't really good for your adrenals and everything as well. And it was only once I was in my later 20s, I was about 29 when my first symptom was my blood sugars were really crazy and wouldn't regulate themselves. And then I became very heat sensitive. So anything over about 70, 72 degrees, like my body, you would have thought I was in, Palm Springs in the middle of summer. My body was just like, nope, you got to get in the shade. You got to stay inside. Like, you know, and at that time I was being treated by Western med doctors, and they're like, nope, everything looks fine. Your testosterone's a little low, so we're just gonna slam you with a B12 shot and slam you with some testosterone, and nope, everything's good. And I'm like, no, everything's not good. You know what I mean? Like I'm not feeling good. And then as it progressed, the real bad symptom was I felt like I had Alzheimer's, like dementia, because I would like be in like Costco and like it would just be this kind of wave would kind of come over me and it was like, where am I? What am I doing? Like, why am I here? And then like a couple minutes would go by as I'm like walking down this aisle kind of aimlessly. And it's very like, it's just a very surreal feeling being 29 years old and being like, something's not right. You know what I mean? Like, something's really not right. And then that progressed over maybe the course of 6 months. Because again, I have Western med doctors telling me all of your blood work is totally normal and fine, other than low testosterone and low B12. Proceed and keep going. And it's like, nope, like something's not right. And it
Yeah.
finally got to the point where I started to get it while I was driving of like, I didn't know where I was going when I was literally just headed across town to
Mm.
like my parents' house or something. And it's like, it was only momentary, but like, it freaked me out because at that time I was like, we were helping take care of my grandmother that had dementia. And I'm like, is this psychosomatic? Like, am I like messing with myself? You know what I mean? But like, it became so consistent. Um, Again, a lot of ringing in the ears, just my body was just really, I feel like in just a constant state of fight or flight, because there was just so much going on. And then I would say maybe a year and a half into it, I gave you guys that heavy metals test. I went up to a place in Newport that I told him my symptoms, and he was the first person that really listened and jotted it all down. And he said, "You're doing a heavy metals test like today, right now. You for sure have heavy metals poisoning." And it was like, it was
Can
a
I
blessing
share
and a
with
curse.
everybody your results here? Are you ready to show them or
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, you can throw
yeah,
them
okay.
up on the
If everybody
screen,
can see what we're talking about.
you know.
This is pretty phenomenal.
And it was like, it was the first time in like over, I would say close to 2 years that like someone was telling me how you're feeling is completely normal and you're not crazy. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because you know what I mean? Like all these Western med doctors are like, oh, it's just in your head. It's like, no, it's not in my head. Like I was super active and outside and you know what I mean? Like, I tried to do the chart as best I could to show where 37 would go or 36 would go to on that range, because when it came back, the doctor was like, dude, we're shocked you walked in here and they were blown away that I was still like, I live on my own, I have my own place, you know what I mean? And they were just like, they were floored. They're like, most people we see with a mercury level that high are usually like on an IV sitting in an emergency room,
So
and I
this is the
wasn't.
mercury here in the middle. Below 3 is the reference interval, right? And you're
Yeah.
at 36. Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. So it was, and then that other one is since doing a lot of the chelation. I haven't done it since then because I got to that point, I think in like 2015.
Yeah. So 4 years
And
later, you're at 2.5, right?
yeah, but
And
I
your
mean,
brain works
we
again.
went we went pretty hard on the chelation of like getting it out of my system. And yeah, it was not enjoyable or fun to go through.
Mhm.
But again, to be where I'm at now ultimately is like by the grace of God. You know what I mean? I'm
Mhm.
like out riding road bikes and able to be healthy and like have a normal life again, So there is hope on the other end of it for those that really are, sick or struggling with something they don't even know why maybe they're even sick. You know what I mean? So
Right.
Right. Right.
The answer's out there, and so that's a lot of what we wanted to share was good on you for being persistent and looking. I mean, it took you 10 years ultimately to
yeah.
kind of get answers. You had gotten some answers, and just to kind of get a little bit on the clinical side, you had done the EDTA and a lot of the IV pushes and so on, and often what happens with those is it'll show labs like yours where, hey, hallelujah, we've got the mercury down. What that means is the mercury's down in the blood, but a lot of those chelations, they're now realizing pushes the metals into the brain. So the
Yeah.
blood's going to show like we have less mercury, but then we got the brain fog or the dementia sort of symptoms, memory challenges because of brain circuits aren't firing well. And that's, clinically where it becomes a real challenge to get this stuff out and how do we move it out of the brain? And actually, Dustin created a great product that I use for this sometimes, often with the lion's mane and the lithium in there, because a lot of times these toxic metals, a lot of the effects is it binds up where minerals, valuable minerals should be, and it creates a deficiency. So then enzyme pathways don't work, and nerve connection to via acetylcholine, which is the nerve's connection to the muscles, doesn't function properly. And so, it may show better on labs, and then we end up with a deficiency. So back like when I was having that mercury challenge I was talking about, and I couldn't ride up Pacific Island Drive, which is part of where you're talking about. I
Yeah.
couldn't ride up that road very well, and my times were tanking. High doses of lithium was a lot of what I used to help get that out of the brain and get me functioning well.
Hmm.
So I mean, you had such a crazy long story there, and you just really are the epitome of what we wanted to talk about today with the
Never give
tats,
up.
whether they're
Yeah.
truth or trend, and yeah, and keep pushing, and so a lot of why I'm in healthcare. I've shared this story, a bunch as well, but I was told I was crazy because they didn't see an aneurysm, causing my
Yeah.
headaches, and ultimately led to a lot of this crazy ministry of mine. Speaking
Yeah.
of, I mean, even your tats were, I mean, you were using them as ministry almost, right? You had,
Yeah.
you had a good story there as well.
You had people telling you you're crazy, right? They're saying, "Oh, that there's
Yeah.
nothing, no correlation."
Yeah. I mean, I was being seen, I won't, mention the doctors or the offices, but like really good top practitioners in the Western med field down here. And, people now are shocked. They're like, what do you mean you're not getting your blood work done? And what do you mean you're not doing this, doing all that? And I'm like, dude, I'm like, the trajectory I'm on right now, like, what I mean, by the grace of God, Dr. V was placed in my life and like has really helped kind of like the home stretch of like kind of bringing it all together, and I've seen definitely the biggest change with him and the protocols he has me on, which isn't, crazy stuff. It's, supplements and just, eating right for your blood type. And, again, it's gotten me to be able to be very active and outside again and doing all this stuff, and again, the Western med doctors, the hardest part was probably to have to erase or override the Western med doctors telling you like, oh, you're always going to be on hydrocortisone because your adrenals and your body is so taxed. You know what I mean? You're always going to be on testosterone. David, you cannot come off testosterone cream. You cannot come off testosterone injections. You cannot come off testosterone pellets. At one point, the Western Med guys, when I was shooting the shots, I mean, I was giving myself shots constantly. My testosterone level went up to a 3,200 on the blood work. I'm like, well, if you're feeling good, you're feeling good. I'm like, I'm not feeling good. I feel like I'm gonna die, And then doing all of that, again, misdiagnosing me with all the testosterone stuff, then caused its own problems of iron building up or red blood
Right.
cells building up, too much iron in my system. So I'm doing phlebotomies. Now, too much iron was taken out of my system. So now I have to give myself iron injections and IVs. And like, it was just this like constant, like, I mean, I literally lived in doctor's offices for years. You know what I mean? And it was like, it was only by the grace of God and the like spirit he's always placed in me of like the eternal optimist. I'm like, Lord, I'm still alive, so there's got to be a reason for it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's,
Well, your message is a good
like
one, especially right now, David. Everybody is being told that they need testosterone. Every man is being told it's
yeah, oh
everywhere
yeah,
and it's out of control. And
yeah,
even if you do feel a little bit better on it, that did not get rid of the heavy metals that were dragging you down, right? So that's a
yeah,
cover up, isn't it? More of a cover up. And it's like I've said this many times, taking that if you feel better is the equivalent of just taking cocaine because you don't have enough energy, right? Because it works for
yeah.
a minute, but it doesn't correct why you don't have the energy. And I'm looking here at your updated charts, and there's still some opportunities to get rid of some more heavy metals. It looked like 2015. When did you
Yeah.
guys start working together? At what point?
Um, how long have I been with you, Dr. B?
Yeah, it was after. It's been since the 2015. It's just been 3 years, maybe.
3 years, I was gonna guess
Uh,
maybe
mm,
3 or 4, like when I was
uh,
seeing him, I was on again, by that point, I was very leery because again, when you've been sick for 10 years,
Oh, I
and
know.
I'm very social and everyone always knows someone that, oh, this person radically helped me. You know what I mean? And like I chased, imaginary rainbows to, lots of gold that never, surfaced for me and stuff. And it was like, and the person that told me, I'm like, oh man, I don't know. And like I really didn't want to go and see someone again because at that point, I mean, you're coming up, at that point, it was like 7 years of all this stuff, 8 years of all this stuff. And it was just like, dude, like,
Yeah.
I don't even want to retell the story and start, at ground zero with someone, but I'm glad I did. You know what I mean? Like, ultimately, like, I prayed about it and the Lord really, like, had it on my heart. And, the first meeting and seeing him and him tell me, avoid tomatoes and potatoes. And I was like, I left his office and I was like, huh. Okay, you know what I mean? And like that's where it kind of went. But like starting with him, I was still on, again, scared to come off the hydrocortisone cream for adrenal support. as well as like high dose of the testosterone cream at that point. Because the injections, I mean, I did it all. I did the hormone pellets, I did injections, you know what I mean? Like I did all of it. And I think it's, again, as anyone, like, oh man, I have friends that are on it right now. Oh man, I feel so much better. I'm like, well, dude, you just watch, to see it where your red blood cell count goes and all this kind of stuff, because there is definitely kind of a slippery slope, and it's, kind of it's just a quick fix that's, I think, has a lot of long-term problems from it.
And
So
and so those meds were exaggerating your anxiety, right? And then with all
yeah,
the cortisone, you couldn't go out in the sun, couldn't you have a warehouse, in
yeah,
a hot side of the state here
yeah.
where you could hardly work and that stuff. So it was affecting your life, and that medically they were saying this is as good as you're going to get, right?
Yeah. It was basically accept where you're at, and kind of like, I mean, they were never mean about it, but like, hey, you're doing so much better than where you were. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm still alive, but I wouldn't call living in a doctor's office and IVs 3 and 4 days a week, and all it just, I mean, I just use kind of common sense and logic, and like I feel like the discernment on my heart, like I felt like the Lord was just telling me, like, you shouldn't be on this stuff. You know what I mean? Like if you're one day going in to remove blood and then having to get iron infusions and all this other stuff, like, it was just the pros and cons of the steroids just wasn't worth it. You know what I mean? Or like testosterone cream and all that, kind of stuff. So, but it was, I mean, I felt like a captive prisoner. Anything over about 70 to 72 degrees felt like it was 130 degrees for me. And my body was like, nope, go back inside. Like you are not going to be out here. Oh, very early on with the heavy metals, anytime I'd go outside and exert myself, my blood sugars would spike and drop super fast. Like, so to counteract that, I'd try to like protein, high carb protein shakes, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, like all that kind of stuff. I have two type 1 diabetics in my family, so I have that kind of stuff always with me in the car for my brother. And then I would end up like, man, the symptoms I'm feeling right now are like that. And I'd go and exert myself, test my blood sugar before I'd go, it'd be like a 120. I'd go and exert myself for like not even 15 minutes. I would come back to my car, whether I was surfing, mountain biking, whatever it was, barely get to my truck, finger prick my finger, and I would be like a 31 blood sugar.
Wow.
And it was like, I mean, that's what really started early on with like the dementia stuff. And it was just like my body was just taxed, and it was like, what is going on? And they couldn't give me answers to any of that other than, you know, here, here's this piece of paper, and your testosterone's low. And it's like, I don't know. I think there's more going
Why?
on here. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm gonna
Yeah.
die,
Right.
so
So I think for those who are watching and listening right now, two major takeaways. Never give up, right? Never stop looking. There's always an answer. There's always more you can do. And I think the biggest takeaway, I think, for anybody listening right now is heavy metals may not be the everything, but it is definitely a piece that everybody should be looking at for sure in the world we live in. I mean, because it definitely, wiped you out for sure as a big part. Now, just so everybody knows, I personally do a little bit of a heavy metal detox every week because I think it's so important. We're exposed to so much. You're breathing it in the air. Anybody with tattoos definitely should be doing this like regularly, not just like one time. It should be an ongoing thing. Every Sunday, I do a little bit of a fast. I do sauna and I do some like clay to pull out the heavy metals. And I want to share this with you, Dr. V, because my brother, Dr. Strong, just gave a seminar on this. And this is a
Nice.
powerful tool that everybody should know. This is one of his slides talking about sauna benefits. One of the best ways to get heavy metals out is to sweat them out. And we have to. And you couldn't go out in the hot, right? So you couldn't be sweating. You couldn't get rid of these.
nope.
But look at these stats. 2 to 3 sauna sessions per week, lower than risk of developing Alzheimer's by 20%, 22% lower risk of dementia, 24 lower risk of dying from all causes. But then you bump it up to 7 times a week, 66% lower development of dementia, 65% lower Alzheimer's, and 40% less likely to die from all causes. I can't help but speculate that a big portion of these benefits are getting rid of heavy metals, right? Because that's a huge
Sweat,
part
right?
of it, sweating it out, right? Sweating out toxins in general. I feel like I need to share that with everybody. If you're not sweating, right, you're not able to move out what we're getting bumped into us every week. So it's just the world we live in now. We have to take active measures to be able to get rid of these heavy metals.
So
Right.
to tee off what you're saying right there, my body I was overheating and like couldn't regulate my body temperature. And in all of it, when I look back on it now, like after seeing Dr. V, was my body wasn't able to sweat to balance its, you know what I mean, to like bring your core body temperature down. And like again, when I started on the holistic route, um, the doctors were always like, oh, well, if you're, my mom has an infrared sauna in her garage at that time. And of course, like, dude, I'm going to try to go in it, even if it does kill me. And like, I couldn't go in it. You know what I mean? Like I would sit in there, I would overheat, I wouldn't sweat. And it was like, it was just hell on earth. You know what I mean? It was just like, if 75 degrees feels miserable, like anything over 100 sitting in an infrared sauna ain't going to be good, So, you know,
Funny, because I know a doctor who listens to this had told me stories of somebody that could not sweat, right?
yeah,
Maybe this
which
is
was
Adrenals.
key.
wild.
They needed to get rid of heavy metals first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So let's talk. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
once the heavy metals, after I'd done those detoxes, and again, the final thing would be finally seeing Dr. V was whatever he had done given me wise to open up those pathways. Now I'm able to like sweat and like I have a infrared sauna in my garage and I rave to people about it. I'm like, dude,
Nice.
you gotta jump. I have friends come over, like my neighbors want to try it. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, try it. You know what I mean? Like there really is something to it, but it's like it's crazy to go from 10 years ago to where my body was just unable to do any of that to where it's like I can sit in a 135-degree infrared sauna for an hour and I'm just,
Yeah. Yeah.
soaking wet and it's like, thank you, Lord. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, because I know, I've seen a lot of those charts and stuff and it's like it's definitely helping me to pull that stuff out. Absolutely.
So, Dr. V,
Right.
let's tell the listeners what channels you opened up, how you opened them up, and how else we get rid of these heavy metals.
Yeah, so the toxic metals and viruses affect the adrenals and the hypothalamus, basically our thermal regulation, right? So he wasn't able to sweat that out. So a lot of it was getting his adrenals rebuilt. We were using adrenal glandular products a lot. We did have to recalibrate the hypothalamus. You'll talk about scar protocols. We did some of that back in the beginning when I first started with him. I started with the most recent tattoos and kind of worked backwards, working on some of the scars and scarring. And that was a project because, as he mentioned, a good portion of his body's inked. So we did work through that. And then we did some lithium products to push the metals out of the brain again, because he had done a lot of the EDTA and so on, which unfortunately does tend to deposit them in the brain. We had to do some good fats, omega-3s. We keep him on those. As we upregulated, facilitated the proper functioning of his adrenals, and we're able to reduce the prednisone, the cortisone, and so on, then he could start getting outside. And, initially he'd have to mountain bike at night because he couldn't be in the sun and so on, if he could at all. And then we were being celebrating when you could go out and enjoy a normal life, normal day. I mean, you're talking about the sauna. I rode my bike it was 80 degrees yesterday, and I was hammering up hills for 3 hours. So I saunaed and sweated out plenty of metals, right, on my Sunday detox. So we did a lot of that. We got his mineral status up, good mineral. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of the consequences of toxic metals are because they're binding up where minerals should be. And so even electromagnetic sensitivity, that often is a mineral deficiency, and toxic metal issues because become more antenna-like instead of, having the minerals to drive these enzyme pathways to drive metabolic and neurologic pathways. So keep the minerals up, keep your organic vegetables, as he talked about the diet shift. Tomatoes, unfortunately, for B blood types and for A blood types, inhibit acetylcholine production, which is liver detoxification as well. So, and then phosphorus, we've talked about on our bone podcast. Those are nutrients that will help keep the calcium in the bones. Part of the phosphorus issue in the potatoes was because he had cadmium. He showed the right arm there. There's some red ink and stuff. Red ink inhibits cadmium, tends to inhibit some phase one detoxification and the production of vitamin D. So that's also part of why he didn't regulate on the heat. Vitamin D levels end up low with the cadmium toxicity. So we had to, again, put some minerals in there and push out the cadmium. Incidentally, we should probably talk about this. If you're listening to this and you're like, I need to get rid of these tattoos. Unfortunately, the quote removal of tattoos is worse.
Wow.
Similarly, about this same time, I had another gentleman that had a full sleeve tattoo with all kinds of color, and sure, it looked kind of cool and artistic and so on, but he was over it, and so he started having it removed. The removal is basically a laser blasting that stuff into your bloodstream. So instead of having it sequestered in the skin, the laser just blasts it so that it doesn't show in the skin, but then it goes into your blood and your liver and your your system.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
this guy went from a similar strong, fit, muscle building athlete to couldn't hardly get out of bed, couldn't work, wafting away, lost 20 or 30 pounds in a matter of a couple of months because his system was just massive. It's going to be even more overloaded than, the numbers we were just looking at with David, because that goes into the system and just, I mean, how do you survive that almost? So that is part of the challenge. I mean, we're talking about the typical approach is get them removed, which means blasting them into the bloodstream or doing a detoxification, EDTA or something that's going to potentially push those metals into the brain and set the stage for Alzheimer's, dementia, and so on. So we really need to, as David had done, keep pushing, keep looking for the answers out there, keep searching, right? And you were talking about the take home. I mean, my take home is keep asking why. Kind of like David was, roundabout alluding to it. He kept, okay, your testosterone's low. Why is your testosterone low? Why is your vitamin D low? I mean, we're in Southern California, even in Texas, nobody should be low in vitamin D. We get more than enough sun, so nobody should be low in the vitamin D. It's not because, ladies, it's not because your hormones are low. It's not because you're coming of age. It's because your body's not producing them as it should. So why is the testosterone low? Why is estrogen low? Why is the body not producing it as it should? Facilitate natural, normal, healthy function, and so that the body can produce those hormones on its own, so the adrenals can produce the hormones, cortisol and that sort of stuff. So I keep searching. The answer's there. Find somebody, look at, um, from a diet perspective, cilantro is a nice herb to bind up mercury. So that's an easy place, do your Mexican food, skip the corn, but eat the cilantro. That's going to be beneficial. So, I mean, we can talk more certainly on toxic metals and the various ones. But you talked about Gotu Kola. So why don't you talk a little bit about the scarring
Well, I was going to
aspect?
ask you about the scarring piece too, because scars, that's the first thing I think of when I think of a tattoo. But now I'm going to start thinking about, is it mercury or is it cadmium? If it's a red one, I'm going to think about that too. But the
Yeah.
scarring aspect of it's very interesting to me. That's a piece that is so hidden that people don't realize.
Mhm.
And it was explained to me this way by a practitioner. I thought this was the best way to think about it. If you think of a screen door, and if it rains, the water beads all the way down that screen door, right?
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
remove the metal and you put an electric charge at the top, that would go all the way to the bottom. But if you
Mhm.
pop that screen door, that water is going to beat up and drop and beat up and drop. And that electricity cannot go over that space. That's
Mhm.
what a scar is. It kind of almost acts as a capacitor to the energy that's flowing on your skin. And it can pulse when it gets too big. And that's like, and everybody knows that a power surge is not good for your computer.
Mhm.
Your heart's electric, your brain, these are like power surges that happen. So
Mhm.
we have to make sure that we're maintaining the healing of scar tissue in our body. And yeah, Gotu Kola is an herb that I did a whole hour presentation in the Herbal Summer School on, because it's phenomenal for being able to reorganize the tissue so that the scar isn't what we call active. It's not something that's going to be creating problems. So anybody who has
Energy block. It's basically when you say inactive, right? Active means energy block. So it's
right, right.
blocking the flow of that energy, right? Carry on. Keep going with you.
Yeah, so anybody who's got any level of high levels of scars or tattoos, I would encourage to probably, and in this, there is a short list of things that I try to think everybody could take every day. And I would say
Mhm,
Gotu Kola is probably one of those. I would
mhm,
also say like a good wheat germ oil, like the vitamin E for the healing of it would be
mhm.
very important. We
Can
talk
even
about
rub that on the scars.
rub it on the scars, but also
Right.
taking it internally, right? Because your body needs that.
Mhm.
Consequently, your body also needs that for testosterone production, right? So that's interesting. Ribonucleic acid is something that's very helpful for scars, right? So I always think of sardines as the best whole food source of that. But if you've got a lot of scarring, you're going to want to, get some RNA or ribonucleic acid.
Mhm.
And then there's cold laser. That's funny that you talk about the laser pushing that in, but a cold laser can actually be healing to that and help regenerate it. What's your approach to scars, Dr. V? So everybody has some things that they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I use an injury recall technique.
Mm,
Originally created by Wally Schmidt. I'll rub in the direction the energy should be flowing over the area, and then a gentle tuck of the chin
mm,
will help to recalibrate, if you will, get the acupuncture energy going back through. I find that the energy patterns, the acupuncture meridians are more profound symptomatically than even nerve flow. And as a chiropractor, we study nerve patterns and that sort of stuff. And yeah, they're certainly relevant, for each vertebra and so on has nerves. But the acupuncture tends to be and acupuncture meridians tend to be more related to the symptoms that people have and getting them back on track. And so those meridians are very sensitive if we have scar. I mean, I've got scars on my legs from all my years of cycling and going down and so on that, I have to work on these areas to correct and keep that energy flowing because, like ladies, C-section scars, another one of those
yep.
that blocks the energy to the organs, which can ultimately affect hormones, right? And so every little scar, every little area, if you had surgery, I mean, the simple starting point could just be rub in, typically it's going to be longitudinally, like up and down on the body in the area, the direction that the energy should be going. Rub that good and firm, do a little chin tuck. There's other protocols in the profession where they rub wheat germ oil on it topically,
Sesame
protocols
seed
like
oil.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, sesame seed oil as well. Um, Wheat germ oil, another symptom of wheat germ oil is sensitivity to, or not handling gravity very well because it causes these transverse planes of fascia. So if you feel like short, or low back pain when you're standing, then that's a sign that you're not the anti-gravity factor in there. What is it, octacosanol that's in there helps also with this trans with these they call it the anti-gravity factor. Had another gym rat kind of guy that was having a lot of low back pain and told that he had to live with it forever. He'd flown in from Washington or something for me, put him on wheat germ oil one single visit, and started him on that, and his whole life was changed. So and wheat germ oil again, that good whole food form of vitamin E, not just D-alpha tocopherol,
Right.
was also going to help with carrying oxygen, keep the blood thin and flowing. So I mean, there's profound benefits there as well.
Nice.
Mhm.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for everything today. I know we're running a
Mhm.
little short on time, but I wanted to hear from David a little bit more before we let him go, since we're so excited to have him here. If
Yeah.
you could tell everybody one thing, anybody listening that you think is most important that they hear from this?
Again, the biggest is, if you have some kind of mysterious symptoms or you're not feeling right, you know what I mean? And you do have even just a couple tattoos, you know what I mean? Definitely start going down that rabbit hole
Mm,
and look and really look into it. If people want to reach out to me, they're more than welcome to, like I feel like it's just kind of my impromptu ministry now, is
mm,
randomly talking with people. They're like, oh, my son or husband is so sick. And it's like, yeah, how many tattoos do they have? Well,
mm.
how'd you know they're covered in tattoos? And it's like,
Wow.
okay, what I mean? It's kind of one of those like, okay, Lord, like,
Yep.
I'll try to share that wealth with him. The biggest takeaway for me is if you end up going down the road and doing the heavy metal testing with Captimer, DMPS, EDTA, any of that stuff, just make sure you're supplementing yourself after the fact. Because, I mean, in layman's terms, as I would explain it, is I was told it doesn't discriminate, it pulls everything good or bad out of your system. And I was doing very heavy IV pushes of this stuff. And the biggest mistake I think I made back then was not having enough supplements coming back into my system.
Right.
Mostly
Um,
minerals, speaking of
yeah,
supplements.
Yeah.
Mhm.
you
Yeah, the
know,
Carry on,
so,
keep going.
mineralization is hypercritical.
oh,
I often,
yeah.
because I do, like I just said, I did my clay to pull it out last night and this morning, every Sunday night and Monday morning, and now the rest of the week I'm been hitting minerals, right? Min checks, all kinds of things to bring the minerals back in. So great point. Awesome.
David, you were on a roll there, and we
Yeah.
added the mineral
Oh,
start
sorry.
part.
Yeah, no, like that would be the big one. And again, like ultimately, like just don't lose hope. You know what I mean? I think for me, it was like, okay, Lord, like I'm still alive for a reason. There must be a purpose through this season I'm going through. Like, and I didn't see it. I mean, I was, at my worst, my entire body would almost feel like it was trembling or shaking as I'd go to bed because I don't know if it was my central nervous system. Again, I'm explaining it in layman's terms, but like I would literally cry myself to sleep thinking and like pray like, okay, Lord, like I'm gonna come to meet you tonight because there's just no way, like my body at some point you can't keep feeling as bad as I was and expect to have a long life expectancy. You know what I mean? Like not to sound, I wasn't depressed or suicidal. It was just more of a realist of like, man, like I really don't feel good. You know what I mean? And oftentimes it was at night that it almost seemed worse and sleep was terrible as well. So it was like, it was just, yeah, it was very trying and enduring time or season of my life. And I'm thankful to have met the right people and be on the other side of it. And, like I've just encouraged people, if you are feeling any of these, like, dude, don't lose hope. Like I'm on the other side of it. I'm able to road bike, live a normal life again. Like,
You must feel superhuman now after working with Dr. V for a little while. Most
oh
people
man,
do.
it's unbelievable. He can still whip my butt on a road bike, which is a little humbling. So we won't talk about being left on the toll road that day. But Dr. V has superhuman strength on the road bike. So it was, but again, it feels good to be back out and active and like, I mean, growing up, I was always very ADD and all over the place. So for me, like exercise was hugely important. So when that got taken away from me, it really became like an internal like mental battle of like, am I strong enough to push through all of this? You know what I mean? Like I no longer have my escape of exercise or activity. Now it's like all I have is time with my thoughts, and it became, increasingly, difficult as like it just felt like it was dragging on. It was like, when I look back on it now, it's crazy surreal to even think like basically my 30s were surviving, deathly sick, laying in bed, like unable to work for several years of it. You know what I mean? Like I was absolutely crippled by heavy metals in my system.
David, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really important that people hear this from somebody who has gone through it like you have. That is so profound and really helpful. So, really appreciate you being here today. We do have to wrap this up. Dr. V, last thoughts? I'll let you know next week we have Dr. Annette Schippel on. So, you mentioned adrenals. She's going to take a deep dive into adrenals for us next week. So,
Perfect.
what else you got to, what
Yeah.
else, what are the final thoughts you want to
Nah,
share?
keep asking why. The answers are out there, whether it's one of us or somebody that listen, the doctors that are listening to this, the answers are there. Especially we're in the information age. Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of crazy information out there too. So we do have to have some discernment, some wisdom, as we sort through that. But keep pushing, be empowered, it's a great place to end because I just had goosebumps with David's story. So
Yeah, yeah,
thank you for sharing that,
awesome. All right, guys. Thank you. Hopefully,
Mhm.
everybody out there listening is inspired and knowing that there's something else you can do. Yes, I appreciate the thoughts on getting rid of the metals, but also being careful in how you do that and making sure you're mineralizing. And check out if you've got scars. That could be the thing that's dragging you down. Scars and tattoos. If you've got them, find somebody like Dr. V or me so we can get you on the right road, or ask David and he'll send you in the right direction too. Okay. Thank you, guys. I'm going to wrap it up and we'll see you next time. Take care.
All right.